You earn more than you used to, maybe quite a bit more. Yet the feeling you expected to arrive with that increase, the quiet certainty that you had finally built something stable, it has not shown up. Instead, there is a different sensation. A low-grade tension you cannot quite name. You are not struggling. You are not panicking. But you are also not settled. And somewhere in the gap between what you earn and what you feel, there is a question you have not asked out loud. What does security actually mean? When the numbers keep rising, but the ground still feels uncertain, this is not about budgeting. It is not about whether you are saving enough or investing correctly. Those are important, but they are downstream of something else. Something structural, because what happens as income rises is not just a change in what you can afford. It is a transformation in what you are protecting, what you are afraid of losing, and what you quietly believe you need to maintain. And most people navigate this transformation without a map. They use the same mental models they had at $30,000 a year when they are earning 3 times that. And those models do not just become inadequate, they become misleading. The standard advice is not wrong. Exactly. Save more. Invest consistently. Avoid lifestyle inflation. These are technically true, but they do not address the deeper shift. They do not explain why someone earning a comfortable income can still feel financially fragile. Why someone with substantial savings can still make decisions from a place of scarcity. Why the goalposts of enough keep moving. Even when you are not chasing status, there is a psychological architecture beneath the spreadsheets, and it changes as you move up the income spectrum. Ignore it, and you end up earning well while still feeling broke. Or worse, earning well and feeling trapped. Let us start with what actually changes when income rises. Not what you think changes, what structurally shifts beneath the surface. The first thing that transforms is the nature of your vulnerability. At lower income levels, vulnerability is direct and immediate. You are vulnerable to job loss because you might not make rent. You are vulnerable to medical expenses because they could wipe out what little buffer you have. The threats are concrete, proximate, urgent. Your security strategy is correspondingly simple. Build a basic emergency fund. Avoid debt. Keep expenses low. The game is survival, and the rules are clear. But as income rises, vulnerability does not disappear. It metastasizes. It becomes diffuse, psychological. Harder to pin down. You are no longer worried about making rent. You are worried about whether you can maintain the life you have built. Whether you can keep your child in the school you chose. Whether you can sustain the neighborhood, the travel habits, the professional image. The threats are no longer about falling into poverty. They are about falling backward, about losing ground. And here is what makes this insidious. Falling backward is a moving target that accelerates as you accelerate. This is the part most people miss. When your baseline rises, your exposure rises with it. Not because you are reckless, because you have made reasonable decisions that now require sustained income to support. You bought a home in a good school district. You established professional credibility that requires a certain presentation. You built relationships around shared experiences that cost money. None of this is frivolous, but all of it creates structural dependency, and that dependency is a form of vulnerability that does not feel like vulnerability because it is wrapped in comfort. The second transformation is in the composition of your assets. Early in your earning life, security means liquidity, cash, accessible money, the ability to respond immediately to problems. But as income and wealth grow, the nature of your assets changes. More of your net worth gets locked into illiquid forms. Home equity, retirement accounts, investments with penalties for early withdrawal. This is financially intelligent. These assets typically appreciate better than cash, but it creates a perceptual disconnect. You can be worth a significant amount on paper while feeling cash poor in practice. And when you feel cash poor, you make decisions from scarcity, even when you are objectively secure. This is why someone with a $500,000 net worth can still feel anxious about spending $2,000 on something meaningful. The wealth exists, but it is not accessible in the moment. And the psychological experience of security is derived not from total net worth, but from felt liquidity, from the sense that you can handle what comes next without disruption. Wealth that is locked away does not produce that feeling. It produces the opposite, a sense that you are simultaneously wealthy and constrained. The third shift is in the cost of maintaining optionality. At lower income levels, you have fewer options, but they are also cheaper to preserve. Changing careers might mean a temporary dip in income, but the stakes are manageable. Moving cities is difficult, but not catastrophic. Your life has fewer dependencies, fewer commitments that lock you into specific income requirements. But as income rises, so does the cost of keeping doors open. Want to switch careers? You are not just taking a pay cut. You are potentially disrupting school zones, mortgage payments, partnership expectations, family stability. Every option you want to preserve now carries a higher maintenance cost. And many people respond to this by closing options preemptively, not because they want to, but because keeping them open feels unsustainable. This is how rising income can quietly reduce freedom, even as it expands material comfort. You have more money, but you are more locked in. Not because someone forced you into a cage, because the life you built, reasonably and intelligently, requires sustained fuel to operate. And the moment you sense that dependency, optionality starts to feel like a luxury you cannot afford. Sit with that for a moment. Now let us talk about the mistakes that emerge from not understanding these transformations. These are not failures of discipline. They are failures of framing. The first mistake is anchoring security to income rather than structure. When income rises, the instinctive response is to feel more secure. You are earning more, so you must be safer. But security is not about what you earn. It is about the relationship between what you earn and what your life requires to function. If your income doubles, but your structural commitments triple, you are less secure than before, not more. Yet because we anchor to the nominal number, the salary, the raise, we misread our actual position. We feel like we are winning when we are actually increasing exposure. This is why people making six figures can feel as financially stressed as people making half that. It is not that they are bad with money. It is that they built a life calibrated to 6 figures. And now the entire structure depends on sustaining that income. Any threat to the income feels like a threat to everything. The income is not cushion. It is load-bearing. The second mistake is treating lifestyle growth as reward rather than commitment. When you get a raise, the natural instinct is to upgrade something. A better apartment, a nicer car, more frequent travel. This feels like enjoying the fruits of your labor, and you are. But you are also making a commitment. Every upgrade shifts your baseline. It becomes the new floor, not a bonus, and once it is the floor, it is locked in psychologically. Downgrading feels like failure, even when it is strategic. This is why lifestyle inflation is so dangerous. Not because spending is bad, but because every increment of spending hardens into expectation, and expectations are expensive to maintain. The third mistake is mistaking income stability for structural resilience. A stable, high income feels secure. You have been earning this much for years. You get good performance reviews. Your industry feels solid. But income stability is not the same as resilience. Resilience is about how well you would function if the income stopped. How quickly could you adapt? How much of your life would need to be dismantled? How psychologically prepared you are for that dismantling? Most people never ask these questions because the income feels stable. And then when disruption happens, and it does, even to competent people, they discover they were far more fragile than they realized. Here is the uncomfortable part. The things that feel like security can quietly become sources of fragility. The prestigious job that pays well but demands total availability. The home in the expensive area that stretches the budget but promises quality of life. The social circle that expects a certain level of expenditure. These are not traps laid by malicious actors. They are choices you made for legitimate reasons. But they create structural lock-in. They reduce your ability to absorb shocks. They narrow the range of futures you can navigate without significant loss. And because they feel like security while you are in them, you do not see the fragility until it is tested. This is why intelligent, disciplined people still struggle here. They are not failing at financial literacy. They are navigating a transformation they do not have language for. They are trying to apply models that worked at one income level to a situation where the underlying dynamics have fundamentally changed. And the advice they receive, save more, invest consistently, avoid waste, is correct but insufficient. It does not address the core issue. The core issue is that rising income changes what you are securing, what threatens that security, and what it costs to maintain. Let us go deeper into the second-order consequences. The things that happen downstream when you misinterpret security at higher income levels. The first consequence is psychological fragility, masked by financial stability. You look secure on paper, good income, growing assets, no bad debt, but internally, you are brittle. Every market downturn feels like a threat. Every rumor of layoffs triggers disproportionate anxiety. Every unexpected expense feels destabilizing. This is not because you are irrational. It is because your sense of security is derived from continuity not from reserves. You need the income to keep coming at the same level. And any interruption to that flow exposes how dependent the entire structure has become. The second consequence is the erosion of decision-making clarity. When you feel insecure despite earning well, your decision-making framework becomes muddled. You cannot tell the difference between a genuine opportunity and a desperate grasp for more income. You cannot distinguish between strategic spending and anxiety-driven consumption. You start making choices that feel like they are about security, but are actually about numbing the discomfort of not feeling secure. This is how people end up in jobs they do not want, in homes they do not love, in lives that look successful but feel hollow. They are not chasing status. They are trying to outrun a feeling of fragility that no amount of income seems to resolve. The third consequence is identity fusion with income level. The longer you earn at a certain level, the more your identity starts to merge with it. You are not just someone who earns this much. You are someone who is this. The income becomes a proxy for worth, for competence, for belonging. And when that happens, any threat to the income feels like a threat to self. This is different from ego. Ego is about external validation. This is deeper. It is about internal coherence, about who you believe you are. And when your identity is fused with your income bracket, you cannot make clear decisions about trade-offs. You cannot evaluate whether a lower-paying role might be strategically better. You cannot consider relocating to a lower-cost area, because those options feel like becoming less, not different. This is the trap that catches thoughtful people. They climbed deliberately. They made careful choices. They avoided the obvious mistakes. But they did not account for the psychological architecture that builds up around sustained higher income. And now they are locked in, not by financial necessity, but by identity dependency, by the quiet belief that maintaining the income is the same as maintaining themselves. So what does reorientation look like? Not advice, not tactics, a shift in framing. First, separate income from security. Security is not what you earn. It is the stability of the gap between what your life requires and what you can reliably generate. This means increasing security is not just about earning more. It is about creating space, about reducing the structural commitments that require sustained high income, about building a life that could function, perhaps differently but still functionally, at a lower income level, not because you plan to earn less, but because resilience comes from range, not height. Second, treat lifestyle growth as optionality cost. Every time you are tempted to upgrade something, ask not whether you can afford it. Ask what options you are closing by making this the new baseline. What commitments you are taking on. What flexibility you are trading. This does not mean living monastically. It means being conscious of what each increment of lifestyle requires to maintain, and deciding intentionally whether that trade-off is worth it. Third, cultivate identity independence from income level. This is harder than it sounds. It requires regularly engaging with the question, who would I be if my income changed significantly? What parts of my life are about what I value, and what parts are about maintaining a bracket? The goal is not to devalue your work. or your earning capacity. It is to prevent your sense of self from becoming dependent on sustaining a specific number. Because when identity and income are fused, you lose the ability to make clear decisions. You are negotiating from need, not from strength. Fourth, build felt liquidity, not just net worth. This means keeping more accessible cash than traditional financial advice suggests. Yes, it is less optimal for long-term returns, but it produces a psychological dividend that compounds differently. When you know you can handle disruptions without liquidating long-term assets, without borrowing, without scrambling, the quality of your decision-making improves. You are not making choices from scarcity. You are making them from sufficiency. And that shift in psychological position changes everything. Fifth, recognize that security at higher income levels is about resilience, not accumulation. You are not trying to build a fortress that cannot be breached. You are trying to build a structure that can adapt when breached, that can absorb shocks, that can contract without collapsing. This requires a different kind of strength, not rigidity, flexibility, not maximization, moderation, not optimization, breathing room. This is what changes when you understand that rising income changes what security means. You stop equating more with safer. You start evaluating trade-offs differently. You build lives that are structurally sound, not just superficially comfortable. You cultivate the capacity to adapt, not just to maintain. You separate who you are from what you earn. And you recognize that the goal is not to feel permanently, unshakably secure. It is to build the psychological and structural foundation that lets you navigate uncertainty without falling apart. The people who understand this do not earn less. They do not live smaller. But they live differently, with more space, more clarity, more actual security, even if it looks less impressive from the outside. They are not trying to prove anything. They are not optimizing for appearances. They are building something that can last, that can bend, that can survive contact with reality. And that is what security actually means when income rises, not a fortress, not invulnerability, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have built something resilient. Something that does not require perfection to sustain. Something that gives you room to be human, to make mistakes, to change direction without catastrophe. You do not arrive at this understanding by earning more. You arrive at it by recognizing what you are actually trying to protect and what it actually costs to protect it. By separating the psychological from the financial, by seeing the structure beneath the numbers, and by accepting that real security is not about reaching a number that makes the anxiety stop. It is about building a life where the anxiety is proportionate, where the threats are real but manageable, where you are not confusing comfort with safety. That is the shift. That is what changes. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You start making different choices. Not because someone told you to, because you finally understand what you are choosing between.